Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, step right up and let me tell you about the trapeze acts that, beginning in 1870, put Bloomington Normal on the map. Dozens of these acts from around here performed in all parts of the United States, much of Europe, and as far away as Australia. Charles Lewis Taylor, a Pulitzer Prize-winning author and journalist, wrote a book titled Center Ring, in which he included the following quote: "With the possible exception of Sarasota, Florida, Bloomington, Illinois contribute as much to the glamour of circuses as any other town in the world." Just this year, the Circus Fans Association of America held their annual conference in Normal. One highlight was visiting the vast collection of circus memorabilia held by Milner Library's Special Collections Department at Illinois State University. Participants also attended a performance of the Gamma Phi Circus. Gamma Phi Circus is the oldest continuously operating collegiate circus in the United States, having been founded at ISU in 1929. There is even a junior Gamma Phi Circus at the university's lab schools. To this day, former members of Gamma Phi have and are still performing with the Cirque du Soleil, for Disney, on innumerable cruises and at many resorts, on television, during halftime shows at NBA and WBNA events, and in the remaining circus troupes still performing in the United States. And so they carry on the tradition of circus excellence, coming from here and entertaining the world, a tradition that is nearly as old as the state itself. Speaking of circuses, Clyde Noble was born in Bloomington in 1881 and died here in 1955. He followed his older brother Charles and joined the circus in 1904, performing with the Flying Fishers. He became the leader of the Flying Fishers upon his brother's untimely death in 1908. The death was not circus related. Emily Vecchi Noble was born in London in 1886. She began her career as a singer, actor, and dancer in bit parts throughout the theaters of Great Britain. At the age of 14, she joined the Kaufman Bicycle Troupe, and that began her circus career. It was in the circus that Clyde and Emily met. They were married in New York City in 1908 and began performing together along with Emily's two younger sisters. Clyde and Emily would never have any children, and when they decided to retire from the circus in 1918, it was Bloomington where they decided to settle. Clyde and Emily were active members of the Bloomington community. Clyde held offices in several organizations, including president of the Association of Commerce, the McLean County Red Cross, and the Young Men's Club. Clyde and Emily were both active in Masonic organizations and were members of the First Church of Christ Scientist. The couple also made regular appearances on and off stage at the Community Players Theater, a theater that they had helped organize. Emily made her debut performance at the theater in 1924, just a year after the theater opened. She was known for her comedic roles. Now let's go meet Clyde and Emily, who will share stories about their lives under the big top.
Daisy, give me your answer too.
Daisy? Who is this Daisy?
I'm half crazy, all for the love of you.
Oh, I think you're completely crazy.
It won't be a stylish marriage. I can't afford a carriage, but you'll look sweet upon the seat of a bicycle built for two.
Oh, Clyde Noble. Oh, a bicycle built for two? You know perfectly well I am a solo bicyclist.
Oh, yes, well, the world's most accomplished lady bicyclist, performing for the crown heads of Europe, acting in Shakespearean plays since childhood, a triple threat, singing, dancing, and acting. Trick bicyclist in vaudeville and the circus. And you wonder why I courted you for 5 years.
I don't wonder why I married you. Happy anniversary, Clyde. And a bicycle ride is the perfect way to celebrate.
I have something for you.
We said no presents.
Oh, I think you'll like this.
Oh, it's a little candy box. It's just like when we were in a circus, and you would try to slip me a candy box when we passed each other on horseback during the opening parade. I'd have to tuck it inside my robe so quickly. Oh, you almost got me into so much trouble.
Gosh, they were strict. It was the Ringling Brothers Sunday School show. No socializing between performers. Girls got 1, a warning, 2, a $25 fine, and 3, kicked out of the circus. 3 strikes and you're out.
And I couldn't risk getting kicked out. It was my whole life back then. And you, I didn't even know you. And I was under constant supervision.
Well, nobody's watching now. No governess, no chaperone, no circus manager. Go on, open it. You might want to take off those gloves.
Maybe I should save them for later, and I promise to share.
I'll open it for you.
Oh, Clyde, it's my engagement ring. Where did you find it?
On the windowsill, where you always put it when you're washing the dishes. Is that why you're wearing those gloves?
I thought it had gone down the drain and I'd lost it forever. This ring survived you sending it to me in the mail, Clyde. If I'd lost it after all these years, I knew you'd be crushed or tease me forever.
Well, why don't you take off that glove and we'll put it back on. Forever. Happy anniversary, Emily. Best trick bicyclist wife in the world. You ever miss your life as a performer?
How could I, married to you, best flying trapeze artist husband in the world, and jeweler? And what woman wouldn't want to be married to a jeweler?
Isn't life odd? I was apprenticed to be a jeweler at the age of 15. Would have made more sense for me to run off to the circus like Harry Green at 16, who was just following in the footsteps of his brothers, Fred and Howard, the Flying Levans.
Not the Flying Greens?
Oh, too earthbound. Well, you know, they practice on hoe handles in a barn.
Hoe handles?
Yes.
Clyde, I thought that was a circus myth, not a fact.
Well, it was a fact that their father disapproved. You see, he wanted them to carry on the family business of making candy.
Oh.
And I was supposed to be a jeweler, so off I went to Chicago to learn how to make and repair watches. It's when I returned to Bloomington that I got the circus itch. You see, my brother Charlie had been hired by Fred Fisher, not his real name, the Flying Fishers.
And were there 5 of them?
Eventually, counting me.
And were they famous?
Eventually. The 5 famous Flying Fishers. We toured Forepaw, Sells Brothers, and Ringling Brothers Circus, where I met you.
I think we went on only 2 dates, always with another couple, for ice cream sodas. The 3rd time we met was to get married.
November 10th, 1908. Best day of my life. Who would have guessed? The year had started out with such a terrible surprise. We were under contract with Barnum and Bailey, the greatest show on earth. We had just rented the Bloomington Coliseum so we could practice our trapeze act in the winter. And my brother Charlie,
I know it's hard.
he was far too young to die, Emily. Remember how young we were?
Oh, so young.
What a waste.
Hey, tell them about the net.
What?
The fisherman's net.
Oh, that's a myth. A circus myth.
Well, we tell myths for good reason. Tell them that one.
Well, they say the Flying Fishers were practicing their trapeze act when Fred and Howard decided to visit a fisherman in Pekin to talk to him about a net. You see, they made one out of knotted hemp rope to hang onto the flyers in case one of them fell. Well, this fellow thought that he looked more like a fisherman than a performer, and that's how the Flying Fishers got their name.
A likely story.
Oh.
But it got us through a rough spot, didn't it?
Yes. And the show must go on. Even without Charlie, the Flying Fishers toured the vaudeville circuit here in the U.S. and then later on went on to Europe as a 3-man act.
So you are as world famous as I am.
What? You knew Charlie Chaplin. We went to dinner with him after we were married. And Mary Pickford, Hollywood royalty.
You knew Will Rogers, cowboy comedian.
We've had quite a life, haven't we? And here we are still, and still married.
I can't believe I almost lost the engagement ring.
You know, I sent you that ring when you were touring with the Kaufman Bicycle Troupe in Germany.
I hardly knew you when you sent this ring.
I knew enough.
You knew enough to know I loved the circus.
Then you knew I'd do just about anything with the circus, including becoming a bicyclist.
Oh, yes.
With La Petite Emily. You as the star, and me.
And my 2 sisters, Margarita and Roma, the daintiest, most novel, and pleasing trick bicycle act obtainable.
Until your sisters decided to return to England.
And you decided to go back up in the air, a daring young man on the flying trapeze.
The Flying Fishers! A return act.
Not a passing act, although you did enjoy making passes at me.
What? You joke, but there was an important distinction. You see, the Flying Levans would become famous for their passing in the air act. The Flying Fishers would become famous for their return act, where a catcher catches a flyer and then returns.
I'm just glad you returned to me.
And I'm glad I caught you.
What a time that was. You know, we had a contract to tour Europe for 5 years, but we had to return home in 1914, when the Great War broke out. Oh, and a few years later, you returned to your Bloomington jeweler with me at your side, happy to be around so many diamonds.
And you still acting in plays at community players.
Well, we need to get you up on that stage more.
Oh, no. I'm happy as the makeup man. Just making it up as I go along.
He flies through the air with the greatest of ease, that daring young man on the flying trapeze.
Was it enough for you to act in community theater after your glamorous, exciting life in the circus?
It was enough. Isn't it enough to do what we can and have what joy we can while we can? Do you still wish you could fly through the air, Clyde?
Sometimes.
His actions are graceful, all girls does he please.
Oh, I just want one girl, La Petite Emily.
And my heart you have stolen away. Come on, Clyde. Let's fly through the air on our bicycle built for two.
In a July 1951 issue of the Pantograph, an article illustrated the far-reaching influence of trapeze artists from Bloomington Normal. That year, the Shriner-sponsored circus at Illinois Wesleyan University featured an aerial act from France. As it turned out, the main French performer, Émile Codriano, had been inspired to become a trapeze artist after watching the Flying Fishers perform in Paris 30 years before. Upon learning that the Fishers were from Bloomington, a meeting was set up between Clyde and Codriano. When Codriano learned how many acts that he had seen were actually from Bloomington, he was astonished. Many of those acts were actually in attendance at his performance at IWU.